There we go. Awesome. Lia Vollack, thank you so much for joining this conversation with me for SoundGirls Living History Project, someone that I look up to, and I'm so grateful that I got to meet. So let's start with a few simple background questions. Start with telling me your name, your hometown, and a broad scope of what you do for a living.
My name is Lia Vollack. I was born in Denver, Colorado, and I still have family there, my mother, my brother, but I left when I was about 16 years old, and went to pursue a career actually in sound. So, I mean, I started out thinking I'd be a musician, but I ended up moving over to sound, which I was really happy and excited about. So I ended up touring when I was young, doing sound crews with rock and roll bands. My career right now is I'm a Broadway theater producer, and ended up in this place, I think, because of working in theater in New York as a sound designer, and then having a little excursion into the film business for about 25 years, and then having worked at a film studio, being able to come back around and come back to theater as a producer. So I can give a more specific long list, but it's too long, so I'm really old. So.
Awesome, thank you. So it sounds like you've always been based in New York, or did you have a few like destinations before New York?
Yeah, when I first left, I sort of toured around a bit and then settled in New York. And I was in New York through the 80s, which is when I did most of my sound design work. And then in about 93, I moved to LA to work in the movie business, to be a music supervisor, but I also ended up being a music editor because I had sound skills. So, and it was a good way. I had sound skills and I had a union card, and that was a good way to make a living. So I was a music editor for a while in LA, and then eventually became a executive at Sony Pictures and was there for about 23 years. And then moved back to New York full time in 2016, although I was sort of bi-coastal from about 2012. So I've either been pretty much in New York or LA, and sometimes both, but really, really happy to be based in New York now.
Awesome. Can you talk about what you liked the most about working in theater and then working in film and television, and which one you actually prefer the most if you had to choose one?
If I had to choose one, I would choose theater because that's what I've chosen. Because I'm really, really excited to be able to come back to the theater. I loved working in music, in rock and roll, but that is really hard work, like hard physical work. And I was really happy when I sort of settled in New York in about 1982, 83, and started doing sound work in New York. And I loved working in the theater. The main reason, to be honest, that I went to work in the movie business was because I was working really hard, and I was doing jobs off Broadway, and I was doing jobs on Broadway, and I was working at ABC television, working for all my children, and I was doing industrials, and I was doing everything that I could to make a living. But I ended up getting to work on a movie, and they paid me so much more on the movie than I had ever gotten paid in theater. And at that point, I had been broke for so long that I was like, I think I'm going to go try this whole movie thing out for a while. And that was great, and I really enjoyed it. And I loved working on the films that I worked on. But when I had the opportunity at Sony to, they sort of entrusted me with starting a theater division for them, I was really, really excited about it, because my real love is live theater, and the idea of being able, it's why I love live music too. I think that experience that we have all been denied for the past 18 months, but that experience of like having a communal experience with other people, watching something, watching like the magic, the lights go down and this magic happens on stage, and you create a world with sound, you create a world with lighting, the storytellers tell you a story. That's a really, I think that's very like a primal experience that's like baked into us from, centuries of like people telling stories around campfires. And it's a very different experience working on movies. And like I said, I loved working on movies. I am so grateful for the great people that I got to work with and the things that I got to do. But yeah, at this point, I definitely was at a point where I wanted to choose, and I definitely chose theater.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And can you talk more about the first show that you actually designed on Broadway? Because a lot of people don't know there's not many women um sound designers that get to work on Broadway. And up until 2021, there's been 9 so far, and you're one of those 9. So can you talk about the specific show you worked on, what the collaboration was like, and things like that?
Yeah, the first show that I had done a lot of stuff off Broadway, and I worked on a lot of shows at Playwrights Horizons, and sort of my first off-Broadway design jobs were actually at Playwrights Horizons when Andre Bishop was there, who's now at Lincoln Center, and there was really amazing work being done at Playwrights then. And I also started working on stuff at different regional theaters, and I was working at the Cleveland Playhouse, and I was their resident designer for a year, although I didn't really live there, but I did all their shows. And they did a production of Born Yesterday that started it there. That was Madeline Kahn and Ed Asner. And they did that. They originated it. Then they toured it, and then they were with the plan on bringing it back into Broadway. So that was in 1987 or 88 that I was doing that. And then we came into Broadway. We were in the 46th Street Theater, which is now the Richard Rodgers. And yeah, that was my first Broadway show. The thing that was sort of, kind of amazing is that I worked on that show. It was a play, it wasn't a musical, so there wasn't reinforcement, but I always really enjoyed doing sound design for plays because I liked creating soundscapes, choosing the music, like there was the music, if there wasn't a composer doing interstitial music, like picking the pre-existing music to go in between, which actually later really translated to what I did in film a lot, being a music supervisor and choosing music to go in scenes and things like that. So it all sort of fed into each other. But so that was my first Broadway show. And I worked on it for about 1.5 years. And I was really, between the touring and bringing it in and everything else. And I think I got paid $5,000, which I thought was like the most money I'd ever made. Yeah, but it was fun. That was probably the first Broadway thing that I really designed.
Awesome. And what genres of theater did you like to work on versus what types what genres of theater do you like to watch? Are those the same things or are they different things for you?
I think I will say as a designer, even though when I worked, when I worked with bands, I was obviously working with reinforcement. I will say and when I would run shows, I did run like some musicals and did stuff like that. But as a designer, I think I preferred to do plays and I loved doing Shakespeare. Like one of my like favorite, probably like right up there with my favorite designs ever, I did for the Colorado Shakespeare Festival, where Val Kilmer was starring as Hamlet. This is so the 80s. So Val Kilmer was starring as Hamlet, and the director was really adventurous and liked to try all different kinds of music, and Val was really interested in sort of Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols and like New Order and Bauhaus, and we put together this whole sort of industrial kind of post-punk like soundscape for the show, and did some really experimental, exciting, fun things, because I think with Shakespeare, depending on who's directing it, you can really experiment with how those stories are told. And I really liked doing plays, because I liked, working with directors, choosing musical ideas and like creating soundscapes. There was one show that I worked on at the Cleveland Playhouse, actually, where they did a version of On the Waterfront, and wanted to use a lot of environmental sounds. So I got to really build like a whole sort of world around it. Scott Lair, who was who I worked for and was definitely like a major mentor to me. I remember there was a show that we did called Hamlet Machine that Robert Wilson directed, that I worked on with Scott, that again had like all of this environmental sounds and tape loops, and really created an atmosphere. And I learned so much from Scott, and Scott is a spectacular designer. And yeah, but I think I really enjoyed as a designer those things more than I did doing musicals. And it may be that I wasn't as good a reinforcement person as other people were, who really specialized in just making it sound flawless. But yeah.
And when you were working primarily in television and film, can you talk a little bit about like what your day-to-day job was and what you actually did? Because I think people have a certain idea of what it means to do music for the screen, but don't really know. So can you talk more about that?
I did I did 3 different jobs, actually. I worked as a music editor, and I'm still a proud local 700 music editor. Pay my dues every quarter. And I worked as a music editor. And so with the music editor, your job is to, before the composer comes on, you help create a temp track, so that while they're cutting the picture together, you put in music, you take it from other film scores, and you build a score. So they're like, oh, we want really scary music here, we want something exciting, we need this cut punctuated. So you build that, and then you also either pull songs yourself or work with a music supervisor who gives you songs to put in. And so and you cut all that material into the picture. And most music editors work on Pro Tools. I worked on Pro Tools, some work on Avids, but a lot of times you work on Pro Tools and then they feed those files into the Avid, or bring your Pro Tools rig to the stage when you mix, if you're doing a full mix. And then when you start working with the composer, your responsibility is to take all the notes, build click tracks. You have to really, in order to be a music editor, you really need to be able to like read music, know music, be able to do the beats, understand time signatures, because you have to be able to work with composers to let them know your music needs to go this long to hit this place. So you create spotting notes. Sometimes there are, multiple music editors on shows. Some people who deal, like a person who deals with the temp track and the source music, and then another person who works with the composer. Because when you're working with the composer, you're like in their studio as they're writing, as they're creating everything, and you're sort of there. You are their conduit to getting their music into the film. And you're there in all the meetings with all the directors. So music editors are a very hugely important piece of the puzzle, that doesn't get a lot of love, maybe like sound designers, just but sound designers in theater, a little unsung but really important. Then I was also a music supervisor, which your job in music supervision is to work with the director to find the songs that go in the film, make sure that they're clear, do all the legal work on that respect. Music supervisors also work with record labels. If there's a soundtrack, finding like the artist to do the big theme song for the movie, putting together those deals, talking to managers, sometimes getting the record deal. That also sort of overlaps a little bit. If the film's a studio movie, then the people in the studio music department sort of facilitate a lot of what the music supervisor is doing. So I also then, so I was a music editor, and then I became a music person at the studio. So I became president of worldwide music for Sony Pictures in 2000. And I did that for quite a while. I started at the studio in 97 working in the music department. And basically I did all of this sort of stuff that I just described, a music supervisor, but you also budget them, you help find the composer, you help, I worked with composers really closely, I think partially because I was a music editor before and I really love composers, and I also really love being in the studio. That was sort of a joy for me. And I think coming from a technical background rather than like a business background or a record label background, like to me, the business stuff and the label stuff was pretty easy to learn. But actually understanding how all this stuff gets put together was pretty invaluable, and I think hopefully was a help to both my directors and composers and music editors. And I would always have like a bunch of music editors that I had worked with who I had either assisted or whatever, who I would always work with again on shows. And it was fun. It was great. It was a lot of fun.
That's so fascinating. And as you were talking, it inspired this random question of going from music to having this like important official position at a
Great job.
was it also like a lifestyle change almost? Like, did you go from dressing very casual at work to then like you had to wear suits when you went to work, and you had like a 9 to 5 schedule? Like, was there an actual lifestyle change that came with that?
The good thing about the movie business and about LA is that it's not like getting a job at Goldman Sachs in terms of like the dress code. Yes, I had suit jackets, but basically like I'm wearing jeans, like jeans and a black shirt. Like I wore jeans and a black shirt. I still wear jeans and a black shirt. I wore jeans and a black shirt when I was on the road. I wore jeans and a black shirt when I was a designer. I have a, I had blazers to wear. I made sure I had a manicure, which I haven't had since the pandemic. But I'm not an executive anymore, so it's okay. And, yes, I had to be in an office and I had different, sort of different responsibilities to a staff when I was an executive. But I always worked really long hours, and at the studio, it wasn't really like a cutoff time, because you would be screening movies in the evening, or I'd go to like meet with people, in a recording studio or a, whatever. I mean, yes, you sometimes, it's different than working in the theater where you're really like, you're in tech or you're doing shows every night. So it wasn't like an every night kind of thing like it is when you work in theater. But it's definitely not like a very strict 9 to 5 thing.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And one step in your life that I forgot to ask about, if this was a step, was did you go to college at all?
I didn't really go to college. I mean, I started to go to college a couple of times and didn't stay very long in any college, and because I kept just wanting to go back and work. So I don't have a college degree. I do have a union card, as I've mentioned. Very proud of that. So I know I'm a producer who's very pro-union, because
And great segue into the next question is being a producer for theater. So what actually do producers do? Is it only about money? Do you fundraise? Like, what is your day to day, and as well as like month to month and year to year planning these projects?
um, what does a producer do? Well, I will say, this is going to sound weird, but I think that, on like the biggest sort of macro level, as opposed to like the specifics of day to day, which I will also let you know as best I can what that is. I think producers put things together, right? And I have to say it's kind of weird, but I think I'm good at understanding how things should go together. And I think that comes from like as early as like mixing sound made sense to me, and like what sounds go together well, and like, doing sound for theater, like how do those things all connect? Like how does the music work with the scene? How does that sound effect fall in there? How does, if you're doing a live mix, like making sure those voices blend the right way. And then being an editor, it was like, how does the music go with the picture? How do those things go together? So in a funny way, I think everything that I've sort of done working with directors, working with creative people, working with music people, working with writers, working with all different, types of creative people making collaborative work. And having done that for so long, and like supporting artists trying to achieve their best work, I think that all really prepared me very well to be a producer. Because I think, what the nuts and bolts of it are, as a producer, you need to raise the money. You've got to be able to, if you're a commercial producer, you've got to be able to raise the money to get the show up. So you've got to have those relationships, and you've got to have people who trust you to handle their money well. You have to be able to, get your show put together to a point where if there's an available theater, the theater owner is still good, giving it to you and to your show. You have to do those things, and you have to put together the deals in the right way, collect a good group of people. But, ultimately, I think it is about supporting artists and finding artists that you believe in and like following their vision. It was something that when I worked at the studio, because I worked on like 25 movies a year, 25 or 30 movies a year over many, many years. So it's literally like, when I added it up, it's like hundreds of movies, which is cuckoo. But because of that, I worked with a lot of different creative people in a lot of different situations. And ultimately, the things that were most successful were times when we let the people who had the vision, gave them the tools and supported them to execute their vision in the best way. And so I really see my role as a producer, if you're a writer or director, or, entrusting your work to me for me to produce, my job is to support getting your vision out there, support the team around you being able to do their best work, and making good decisions so that it can be as successful as possible, so that it can have a life. And like, part of that doesn't mean always saying yes. That also means sometimes saying, this thing that you want is really complicated and really expensive, and it's going to create these kind of stressors on the project. Like, it means that you're going to have to be doing really, really big numbers every week. Do you really want that pressure? But having those conversations honestly, with creative people about it. So I don't know. I think I love doing it. It's been a challenge over the past year because like now you have to be an epidemiologist on top of trying to, support artists. But, I'm getting my epidemiologist on. I'm good. Learning a lot. Know more about virology than I ever wanted to. But
in terms of theater, as a sound designer and as a producer, how does the way that you talk to directors change now that you have a producer hat on? Because I can't imagine the types of conversations you had to have with directors as a producer.
um, I don't know. I guess I would say there's certain things that you have to deal with that I want to sort of protect the director from having to deal with, so the director can focus on the things that are the director's, issues. But at the same time, I feel like it's really important to treat your director as a partner, and make the director and the writer, the creative people that you're working with, and and the composer, if you're doing a musical, need to be your partners, and you need to treat them like your partners. And I found, at least so far, that being able to have good straightforward conversations, about good things and bad things is a good way to go. I mean, I really, really love the people that I'm working with right now. And I guess it's, I think it's also maybe the people who I've chosen to work with, who have chosen to work with me. We sort of have a good relationship and a good balance, which I think is good. And so, yeah, I mean, I try to be pretty honest with people. I think that when I was a designer, I think I was also pretty honest sometimes, maybe to my detriment. But and I was a lot younger then. I mean, I was a lot younger than I am now. I think I'm more I'm more mature, certainly, in many ways. But yeah, I think part of like a collaborative art form is that it is actually needs to be collaborative. And I think I don't think producing, I know that there's some producers who, are like, this is what we're doing, and this is this, and that's that. And I certainly have those opinions. I'm like, this is what we should be doing. But I usually try to, explain why I think that's that way. And if somebody presents me with a counter argument that's like, no, I really need it to be this way, then, I'll listen to that too. So.
Awesome. And can you also talk about just advice or words of wisdom about making a career shift? Because you shifted twice, and I think especially for like younger people, we feel as though if we have to or need to or want to change our career path, that means we're not good at what we were doing at first, if that makes sense. But you
Right.
have it, and you have done great in all the things that you've done. So can you just speak about like changing your mind and changing course and things like that?
Yeah, I think it's really, I was always very, I've always sort of been open to other opportunities. And I don't know that any of my real career shifts were like planned exactly. Do you know what I mean? It was sort of like, I when I kind of shifted into the movie business, it was really because Norman Renee, who was a director in the 80s, and Craig Lucas, who was a writer who was still writing. Norman died of AIDS. But I had worked with them on a lot of shows, and I had, I just done a lot with them. Scott worked with them as a designer as well, Scott Lair, and also a man named Bruce Cameron, who was a sound designer in the 80s as well, who I assisted, who I got to know them through. And I did work with them. And when they got a movie to direct, Norman got a movie to direct that Craig had written called Longtime Companion, that was going to be an indie movie. They said, do you want to be our music supervisor? And because I'd always picked the songs, when we'd done this stuff, and I was like, yes, absolutely. I was like, I don't know what that is, but yes, I will figure it out. And it was a great experience. And I did, like, looking back at it now, I'm sort of like, oh my goodness, I knew nothing. And like the stuff that I did was probably crazy. And, I mean, the music in the movie all sounds good, but like, there were so many, like, I didn't understand clearance. I didn't understand record labels. I didn't understand anything that I was supposed to understand as a music supervisor. But I kind of, dove in, really enjoyed doing it, liked working with them. And that movie was successful. And so there was a show that they did, a play that they did called Prelude to a Kiss on Broadway. And then that 20th Century Fox me which I really appreciated, and I was lucky. But when I did that, I made more money doing that movie, and it wasn't even very much money, but I made more money doing that movie than I'd ever made in my entire life. And I, wanted the opportunity to make more money, to be honest, so I thought I will just, maybe make a career switch, because that opportunity was there a little bit. And I will say, I went to LA, and like, the doors were not wide open. It was tricky, and it wasn't until I did a movie called The Usual Suspects that I got through a completely random connection. But this movie ended up going on to get a lot of Academy Award nominations. So it was like a cool credit. So all of a sudden I was with like a cool, fancy bunch of people, and they, so that helped open more opportunities. But it's always just sort of been, you know, seeing an opportunity in front of you and deciding if you want to take it or not. And it didn't mean that I didn't love my theater design career, because I really did. But at the moment that I was at, it was not, you know, feeding me. I was not, I mean, and to be honest, I was not as successful as, you know, the big sound designers in the 80s. I you know, I think partially because I really wasn't that interested in, and so I think also because of that, I wasn't that good at doing reinforcement. It wasn't something that I really, you know, pursued. And you know, a lot of the people I knew Brian Ronan a bit then, because I used to work out of Mask Sound, and Brian worked out of Mask Sound. And like I said, Scott was, I assisted Scott, and you know, I had a good career, but it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't entirely feeding me. And so when I experienced something else that was exciting, that was really satisfying, and I was making more money at, I was like, oh, I should go try that. So I guess the thing with careers, it's not like, I don't feel like my career as a sound designer was a failure. It wasn't. It was spectacular, and it was great. And I achieved a lot, especially given, you know, my age, and also being a woman in sound is, as I'm sure part of the reason SoundGirls exist, that's just a rough road, man. That's like, there just aren't many chicks who do this. It's like not a thing. And so and it's not like I experienced that I would say I had like direct sexism against me, or because I think I was so trained to just ignore it that I didn't even like notice it. I just would not acknowledge it. But you know, you're the one girl in the room, you know, and I don't know. So I had a good time doing that. But I also think like your career should be able to grow and evolve, and you should just be open to it. Like that would be my advice. Like I said, I didn't plan it. And also getting the job at Sony, I was a music editor on a show. I was literally the music editor on a movie that was having terrible problems. And the guy who was the head of music then said, does anybody know how to fix it? And the producer at the time said, well, I think Lia probably has some ideas. And I was like, yeah, I have ideas. I know how to fix it. Put this music here and this third. And I went and I helped them fix the music in this movie. And the thing that I didn't know is that guy at the time, his contract was coming up, and they told him he needed to hire a number 2 person who was strong. And there was a new head at the studio. It's like a totally random circumstance. And the new head of the studio was like really happy when she saw the new music. So he was like, would you like to be my number 2 person? So all of a sudden I went from being a music editor to being a studio executive. And I thought that sounded great. So I didn't know how to do that either, but I just did it because I just was like, okay, I'm standing in the right place at the right moment. So I think it's about that. I think it's about like, you know, being in as many places as you can, taking risks, even if you don't know, you know, even if you think you don't know what you're doing, you know, but you think you might take a shot at it. And, you know, and I think that's how I grew my career. I know different people have different paths, but I really didn't exactly plan any of it.
That's great. And to hear you talk about Scott, what it was like to work with him many times, and all of the other people that have like given you chances. You talk about your definition of what it means to be a mentor as well as to be a mentee. Like, what makes a good mentee that someone would want to help? So, just talking about mentorship.
Yeah. Mentorship for me is everything. Like my whole career, without it being like a formal relationship, people that I've been able to assist, um, you know, people that who'd been in businesses longer than I had, that I was able to get advice from. There've been producers that I know from the movie business who've been, generous with um, their time and their advice. Uh, and I really, and like I said, assisting Scott was fantastic. He was incredibly generous. And let me use his studio. He never charged me. I'd be doing like these little off-Broadway nothing shows, and I'd be there till like 3 a.m. on tape decks, because I didn't have any of this technology. I wouldn't even know where to begin. Like, I could not be a sound designer now, because like I learned on reel-to-reel tape, 1/4-inch tape, 1/2-inch tape, 2-inch tape. That was how I did everything, with a razor blade and a grease pencil. But Scott was really important, and Bruce Cameron was really, really helpful to me too. And also, there was a guy named Tom Source who used to work at Mask Sound, and I got to work with him on Waiting for Godot that Mike Nichols directed in the 80s. That was one of like the really, really great experiences, because Tom was sort of like, you just take care of it in the theater. I've got to go back to this shop. And I spent a lot of time around Mike Nichols, which was great. And then I subsequently ended up doing movies with Mike Nichols later in my career, which was really amazing. And he remembered me from doing that. And that, I think, made me happier than anything in the whole world. But yeah, I mean, I think that mentorship is really, really important. And I think that it's a good way to learn. I mean, and I do it for the guy who is working with me, who's my assistant right now. I just let him sit in on all our meetings, because he can just listen, hear what's going on, sort of learn by being in the room, and then ask questions and learn after that. I don't know that for me, I ever had anybody who was like formally my mentor. It was really, relationships like that where I was assisting, and then they were very, very generous. And I think that's part of I guess it's kind of the approach that I take toward mentorship myself, like, bringing people in. But I also, not that I think I know so much, but I'm always really happy if there's somebody who wants to talk about what their aspirations are and what they're looking to do, or to connect people, because I think it's kind of everything. And I know I keep talking about unions, but I think it's one of the things that was great that that unions did really well, was that unions had union apprentice programs, right? So that people would come in and you would learn under people who were more experienced in the field. And I think it is really important. I don't know that answered your question entirely.
It did. That was fantastic. You got through like most of my questions, so we can like wind it down a little bit. Um, Besides theater, of course, and I guess movies and television, what other art forms do you like And also, I'm so curious to know, like, what are some of your favorite movies and TV shows, even things that you didn't work on?
Um, that's so hard. I like, um, in terms of art form, I like architecture. I like museums. I love going to museums. I love going to see live music, which we haven't been able to do forever, either, and sort of all kinds of live music. I love going to rock shows. I like going to, I love going to opera. I like symphonic, shows, but I also, love Lollapalooza and Coachella and like big giant festivals. And then I like little tiny shows and clubs. I like all that. I love museums. Um, I I love reading, but I will say that I like the I've gone through points in my life where I had a lot more time to read. Like this last year, I had, somewhat more time to read. Um, but being in the theater and being in the movie business, I had less of that time, and especially in the theater now, because like you spend your nights, in a room seeing work. So I don't really read novels as much, but I do read a lot of nonfiction. And I'm interested in nonfiction because I like stories about life and people's perspectives on things. Um, and movies and television is like, it's like, the problem is like there's too many. So then it's like, if I mean, one of my favorite movies that I worked on, and I can't really separate the experience of working on it from the film, but was probably Social Network, because I really liked working with Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross and David Fincher on that film. I enjoyed doing that a lot. And I don't know, it's so hard. Like favorite movies, there's probably like, Do the Right Thing is one of my favorite movies. I'm trying to think of my other, like, so weird that you can't think of anything when you're,
Oh, there's so many.
there's like too many things that I like. Uh, I like, I like the Godfather movies because I think that everything you need to know about business in the entertainment business is in the Godfather. Everything. Basically, if you just roll by those Godfather rules in the entertainment business, you're kind of good. What else? Oh my goodness. I really, I love The Watchmen. I'm trying to think of other stuff that I've liked on TV recently that I thought was super cool. See, the thing that's bad though, because now it sounds like I only like Trent and Atticus because The Watchmen was also scored by them. So see, I'm not that limited. But I love that. What else? Oh my goodness, I don't know.
Our last question. Now that we're coming out of out of this pandemic slowly, um, what's something you really want to experience or accomplish within the next year, whether it's a work goal or a personal goal?
Um, I have 3 shows that are all in varying stages of trying to be on Broadway, and I really want to get those 3 shows up. One is MJ, which is on its way. which is going to be coming up. We start previews on December 6th, and I'm really excited for that. I've been working on this for a long time with Lynn Nottage. We started working on it together a long time ago now. And I'm really excited to finally see it up. It was supposed to happen in July of 2020. So it's been a little bit of a wait, but I'm glad to get that up. I have Almost Famous, that is a musical based on that movie that Cameron Crowe wrote. And then I have a show, a musical, a revival of Ain't Supposed to Die a Natural Death, which is something that Melvin Van Peebles wrote that was nominated for 7 Tonys in 1972. It is an excellent piece of work. And Kenny Leon's going to direct that. And I'm really excited about that one. And that one will, you know, so in the next year, I want to make sure that I'm trying to get all those up and situated. That's what I want to accomplish in the next year. I feel very lucky and very blessed to have so many people who have believed in me and, you know, let me have the opportunity to work with them on their work, and I want to deliver for everybody. So that's what I got to do.
Awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time. This was amazing. Let me stop our recording.